Inga mana, inga reo, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Joanne Clapcott toku ingoa. Haere mai, ki tēnei hui a ipurangi. So welcome to this online meeting today and thank you for making the time to join us. Today's webinar is part of the Biological Heritage Bites webinar series, which are designed to share with you pertinent research from our National Science Challenge. Today's topic is sharing knowledge to empower collective approaches to restoration. So I'd like to open today's webinar with a karakia. So he karakia te matanga. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e tātou katoa, haumie, huie, tai kie. So before I introduce our speakers today, I've just got some brief housekeeping for you. There is a webinar help guide in the handout section on this webinar platform. So if you're experiencing any issues, please look at this. You'll also find a copy of the project report presented today in this handout section. So for the session today, we'll have approximately 15 minutes of presentation. Then we'll follow that with 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. Please submit your questions for the Q&A in the questions section on the webinar platform. We'll do our best to answer all your questions during the session, but if we run out of time, we're happy to follow up with you after the webinar. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. First, Dr. Kylie McFarlane is a social scientist at the Cawthron Institute, whose work explores the history and practice of environmental governance in settler colonial contexts, with particular interests in freshwater and environmental justice. Joining her is Dr. Raven Cretney, who is a social scientist based at Lincoln University and the University of Waikato, and her research focuses on collective action and policy change relating to environmental and post-disaster issues. So as part of the Bioheritage National Science Challenge, Kylie and Raven have been investigating the potential of a restoration collectives as a pathway to ecosystem regeneration. They convened a pilot network of restoration collectives to better understand the contribution collectives make to community-led restoration in Aotearoa, and to support them in this role by facilitated shared learning among collective leaders. So over to you, Kylie.
Kia ora, and tēnā koutou katoa. Ka nui te koa mō te koutou kai ngākau ki te aro mai ki tēnei hui. Ko Kylie McFarlane aho, he kaipūtai pāpori aho no Cawthron Institute. Welcome everyone to this presentation on sharing knowledge to empower collective approaches to restoration. My name's Kylie and I'm joined today by my research co-lead, Dr. Raven Cretney, who's going to chime in shortly. I have been told I'm having a few internet issues, so I'm sorry if the screen lags at all. Before we go any further, we would like to acknowledge the contribution of the wider bioheritage team to this research, and in particular, co-leads of the Pathways to Ecosystem Regeneration program, Dr. Joanne Clapcott and Dr. Danielle Shanahan, who've been committed supporters of and participants in this research throughout. Also Julie Whitburn, who assisted us with several wānanga, and our science communicator, Michaela Holloway. Also thanks to Ezra Whitaker, who created the beautiful illustrations in this presentation. Ngā mihi mai aha kia koutou. So over the last 2 years, we've been examining the role that collectives are playing in community-based restoration in Aotearoa. New Zealand is actually relatively unique globally in terms of the key role that volunteers and community groups play in nature conservation. We've got thousands of whānau, hapū, and interest groups who commit their time and resources to caring for their local environments through things like pest control, planting, monitoring. However, as a country, we're also struggling to keep up with the scale of issues like biodiversity loss and invasive species. And communities are consequently calling out for more and more effective action to protect their treasured places and species and assist in the recovery of degraded ecosystems. In response, a new approach to community-based restoration has become increasingly common, where community entities are opting to work together as part of a larger collaborative organisation to undertake larger scale, more holistic and more effective restoration. We call these new collaborative organisations restoration collectives. And common examples could include many of the biodiversity forums, iwi or hapū collectives, predator-free networks and catchment collectives that have arisen around the country in the last couple of decades. So I'm going to now share a short video with you where you're going to get to hear from a few of the collective leaders themselves as they describe their work and support needs. I'm told this might just take a moment to load, so please be patient. Raven, are you seeing it now? Thumbs up? No? I'll hold on. Okay.
When you're investing in a restoration program, you're investing not only te taia and benefits for nature, but you're also investing in people and the connections they make.
In the last 10 years, we've seen a whole range of organisations forming around the country that bring together groups that are working on the ground, and they provide the support and the resources and the connections that enable those groups to work together to landscape scale approaches to restoration.
Wairarapa Pukaha Te Kawakawa was formed to try and get the people working on the ground in the Wairarapa for nature, for biodiversity, to work together and to talk to each other and to share resources and to share knowledge and to learn from each other.
Ngā kaitiaki o ngā Waimāori have a voice for hapū in spaces that wouldn't usually be there. The restoration work, it's a living thing for us. It's a part of our taiao. It's been left for us as a legacy from our tupuna.
Ngā Ponorau o Rangatike is a collective of 5 iwi. We're sharing our mātauranga alongside of our aspirations to improve the well-being, enhance and protect the awa.
The Aotearoa Heathcote River Network was formed as a community voice to seek change for the river and, and to work with others around making that change happen.
To resource us for longer periods of time, because we're only getting momentum now. So if we were resourced financially in our roles we already have, then we'll be able to show some more viable outcomes.
We need the funding to have a central person who will help the groups get established, help the groups get going, meet some of their needs so that they're not floating on their own.
We have the knowledge, we have the experience, we have the ability to communicate with all of those communities, all of those stakeholders, and if you want to take advantage of that, then invest in us.
We're really wanting to help our native taonga and our communities to thrive. That's the ultimate goal.
Okay, we back on slides, Raven? Ka pai. Okay, so in this study, we sought to understand what role collectives are playing in the landscape of community conservation and what this means for their ability to contribute to large-scale ecological regeneration. Specifically, we wanted to know how collectives are supporting communities to make progress on their restoration goals and some of the challenges that are involved in working collectively. And in recognition that restoration collectives are a relatively new form of community organising and are often having to kind of build the plane as they fly it, as one of our participants said, we also wanted to explore how peer-to-peer learning could help to support collective leaders in their work. So to do this, we convened a pilot network of 15 collectives from around the country, which brought collective leaders together to share their knowledge and experiences of large-scale community-based restoration. And we would like to say a big mihi to all of these organisations and the leaders who've contributed their time and their whakaaro to this research. The research involved 3 main phases. So first of all, collective leaders helped to design the pilot network through a survey and a hui, where they identified the objectives, the format and the operating principles for the network. They gave it a name and they identified some key topics of interest. We then held wānanga over a 12-month period in which collective leaders shared their knowledge, their stories and challenges relating to a series of restoration topics. We had 5 wānanga online and 1 in person, and we prepared minutes and a summary report for each of these wānanga. Following the wānanga, we also held 3 focus group interviews in which network members provided us with feedback on the pilot network and helped to elaborate some of the key challenges that they are facing in undertaking collective restoration. And I'm now going to hand over to Raven to summarise some of the key findings from this research. Over to you, Raven.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks, Kylie. As Kylie has mentioned, I'm going to start out by sharing some of our findings from this research. So this will be quite a quick overview, and you can find more details of these findings in our report, which is in the handouts bar on the right-hand side of your page. So as part of establishing and facilitating the shared network component of this research, we were also aiming to understand in more depth the value and role of collective organisations, especially how collectives fit into the wider context of conservation and environmental restoration. So as you've probably gathered from some of the introduction, collectives are diverse and they're also place-specific. They evolve over time and utilise different organisational roles and structures as needs and plans change, but they also share many common aims and goals. Through our research, we identified 6 of these key roles. First, collectives connect and support action for restoration across communities, regions, and landscapes. This enables collectives to build momentum and strategic direction for restoration at multiple scales. Second, collectives connect community entities with decision makers across institutions and at different scales of governance. Third, collectives champion action in their communities. This can be through raising awareness of local environmental issues, celebrating the success of community organisations, and advocating for restoration activities. Fourth, for most restoration collectives, another key role is to support community groups to undertake the on-the-ground restoration group that they are most passionate about. Fifth, collectives lead and support the development of community visions, strategies, and plans. And sixth, collectives provide important forums for learning and knowledge exchange, including facilitating cross-cultural learning. So we've described each of these roles in more detail in the report, but I'd now like to share a few key points from each of these themes that relate to the themes that collective leaders shared with us throughout the research and network wānanga. The first is around the importance of providing strategy and vision for restoration work. A real strength of collectives is their role in co-developing shared visions and strategies for communities. Other researchers have noted that there are elements of fragmentation across a number of aspects of community-based conservation in Aotearoa. Collectives are able to help bridge these gaps and support restoration that works towards larger scale and more holistic action. Collectives put significant time and energy into developing the skills and resources required to work with diverse communities and partners. This sort of collaboration is the glue that holds together these holistic approaches, and it requires dedicated resources and expertise, which collectives are able to offer their communities. Participants in the network shared with us the many ways that they work to create these shared visions. Being able to bridge across different groups was highlighted by many, as you'll see this quote from one collective leader, where they shared the importance of working with a farmer collective to build a shared vision and then a good working model for collaboration. This common ground and direction for future plans helps to keep organisations focused on both short and long-term goals, while also strengthening capacity for advocacy. The second key point is around the importance of supporting and growing community. As one collective leader described to us, creating connected communities is a key aspect of what we are trying to achieve. This was a strong theme that was carried through most of the research and our experience facilitating the network. Restoration collectives play an important role in building relationships and connecting organisations and groups with a number of important sectors, such as policymakers, mana whenua, councils, and funding agencies. Many collectives are working towards interconnected social and environmental goals, so these connections are even more important for ensuring there is cross-sector involvement and support in their activities. Community really is at the heart of what collectives are working towards, both social and ecological. These relationships and connections can also be really useful for coordinating advocacy and communicating key restoration goals and needs to funders, government, and the public. Another key area where collectives support and enable restoration work in their communities is through providing on-the-ground resources and assistance for smaller community groups. Collective leaders told us about how they provide the important organisational and social infrastructure that allows community groups to do the work they're most passionate about, things like neighbourhood trapping networks, habitat, and freshwater restoration. Support needs look different for each community and group, but collective leaders told us about how they provide extensive support with administration, managing funds, and navigating regulations such as health and safety. They also provide access to expertise and skill sharing, becoming conduits for the many different types of knowledge needed to support restoration. In some cases, collectives provide libraries of practical tools and resources like monitoring tools Or one other example was a collective which has a morning tea kit of a table, thermos, cups and chairs for community groups to provide social gatherings as part of events or volunteer sessions. Providing this support to community groups enables and empowers these groups and allows collectives to specialise in the administrative and organisational context and skills that are needed to support others who want to specialise in carrying out the action on the ground. As one collective leader explained, for small community projects to set up as an incorporated society or charity, have a treasurer, to meet health and safety regulations is really difficult. There's a huge future for collectives to support that kind of grassroots work. So I hope that gives you a bit of an overview of some of the important roles restoration collectives contribute. Often their work is not as visible as they're not always the ones putting trees in the ground or checking traps, but the roles they play are essential in the smooth and effective running of many parts of the restoration landscape in Aotearoa. This work is not easy, and collectives face many challenges in the work that they do. Collectives are often at the coalface of navigating challenges that impact both themselves and the community groups that they support, such as funding cliffs and increasingly crises such as disasters, for example, the recent floods and cyclone, which can not only divert resources, but also create practical and logistical challenges for everyone working towards restoration goals. From our research, we heard about a number of challenges from collective leaders. Broadly, these challenges encompass the complexity of managing people and relationships, the need to develop diverse capabilities and capacities, the sustainability of funding and resourcing, and challenges associated with the wider restoration context. We also heard from iwi and hapū-led collectives about the challenges they face in obtaining equitable funding and managing degraded land and infrastructure with the aim of creating a healthy taiao for their whānau and future generations. For example, the photo in the slide shows one of the collective leaders, Shantae, from ngā kaitiaki o ngā wai Māori, discussing the old flood pumps they are working with in the Hikurangi repo, where they are working to move the taonga species tuna past the pumps which would otherwise kill them. Some of the participants in the network expressed frustration that the Crown had carried out or supported the infrastructure, development and land use changes that degraded their waterways and other ecosystems, and now relied on tangata whenua and other communities to restore these environments through contestable funding. I'm now going to share a bit more about two key areas where collectives could be better supported in their work to address these challenges. The first is probably no surprise, and that is the need for sustainable funding and resourcing for collectives. We consistently heard from collective leaders the challenges they face, including a lack of long-term funding pathways, lack of recognition of the specific role of collectives, and issues surrounding tītiriti, resourcing and equity. In the first instance, there is a need for long-term funding options that enable collectives to undertake effective restoration and facilitate long-term change. Grant funding is typically allocated for discrete, time-bound projects, proposed in isolation from other initiatives. This makes it difficult for collectives to resource the long-term multi-scalar planning required to create holistic and landscape-scale action. As this participant commented, you get a massive funding boost right at the beginning, but it doesn't have a long-term funding plan. Existing funding models also impact the ability of collectives to maintain momentum and pose a risk to relationships with organisations and communities. Government funding is highly vulnerable to periods of political volatility in which funding streams become uncertain, subject to change, or even cut. Hapū and iwi collectives stress that their work is on a lifetime and multi-generational scale, and that they need reliable resourcing so that they can make sure the next generation are able to be supported in this kaupapa. Another key issue is the lack of recognition for the specific role of restoration collectives. Their role as support and connectivity organisations means they primarily require funding for coordinator and administrative roles and related operational costs. Participants noted that this is not as attractive to funders as event or project-based activities, such as planting trees or fencing waterways. To address some of these challenges, collective leaders shared how they were working to create innovative options for funding and putting effort into building relationships that could support their fundraising. Some examples of these options included business sponsorship or partnerships, memberships, ecotourism ventures, and contracting for services. The second area of support needs is around capacity and capability. In their work, collectives draw on an extensive range of skills and capacities to support different community groups and agencies in a range of contexts. While this is a significant strength of these organisations, collective leaders also shared with us the challenges they face in building and maintaining these capabilities. Some of these challenges include developing and maintaining capacity at an organisational or board level, retaining staff and therefore organisational knowledge, especially as there is often a need to employ people as contractors due to funding arrangements, which means that if staff are offered more permanent employment opportunities, they'll often take them. Collectives also play a key role in supporting smaller organisations with regulations and requirements, so they must be able to maintain up-to-date and accurate advice and support across a broad range of areas, from finance to health and safety and restoration science. There are a number of areas where collectives could be better supported in relation to these challenges. For example, one participant commented that a more cross-partisan approach to conservation and restoration aspirations and visions could help maintain momentum and create more certainty for restoration work and the ability to develop long-term capabilities. Being able to easily access up-to-date information and expertise relating to legislation and regulation changes is another area where collectives could be better supported. And collective leaders often told us that there is a need for greater access to research and the latest developments in restoration science and practice. And this is one area that as researchers and scientists, we can provide more support and greater access to our work. So I hope this gives you a good overview of some of the key areas where collectives could be better supported and the important mahi that they do. I'm now going to hand back to Kylie, who will share some more insights about the Shared Learning Network pilot, which is one way that we can support collective leaders to come together and share knowledge to build capacity to approach some of these challenges.
Got it, Raven. So Te Taio Collectives Network was really developed to empower collective leaders to overcome the challenges they encounter in their work by enabling them to connect with their peers, discuss barriers, and learn from each other's approaches. It also provided a valuable opportunity for us to examine how shared learning networks can support community environmental leaders and their organisations. Participants reported a number of benefits from participating in the network, and 3 of which I'm going to outline now. So first, and unsurprisingly, participants identified learning as a key benefit. The diversity of skills, knowledge, experiences and activities that were shared through the network created opportunities for participants to develop their knowledge and their ideas across a wide range of topics. Participants shared new ideas and different approaches that other leaders could adopt in their own work. For example, one collective's plan on a page attracted a lot of interest among leaders that were seeking to enhance their organisation's strategic direction. Collective leaders also offered different perspectives on common issues, which helped those other leaders to reframe these issues and to think about them in new ways. One participant commented that even understanding that other groups face similar issues was a really big relief to them and made them rethink their response. This type of learning can support leaders to identify issues and problem solve. And as one participant noted, in the complex work that collectives do, learning from their peers creates a broader range of ideas on how to deal with situations that can arise in their day-to-day work. The network also played an important role in facilitating relationships and connections. Participants reported that the network helped to bring people together and to bring together people with shared interests and goals, and it gave them the opportunity to meet socially with like-minded people. This provided leaders with a chance to expand their professional and personal connections. This is really important, as many collectives report being isolated in their work. As one said, we were not connecting with anyone at all, and now we have connected with people across the country and across a range of types of groups. So the network enabled participants to develop these relationships for ongoing support and to think through challenges and opportunities with their peers. For example, this leader reflected that they're now able to call others up when they have questions that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get answers for. And in several instances, collective leaders are now connecting one-on-one outside of the network in order to learn more about each other's work and how they're dealing with specific but related issues. Collective leaders also observed that sharing knowledge and experiences provides valuable opportunities for them to reflect on their own practices and approaches. So in being able to offer ideas and insights to others, collective leaders were able to recognise their own expertise and to reflect on their own progress and how far their organisation had come. And this created space for them to also think about future options and what next steps might look like. Wānanga also helped to validate the approaches and the work underway in collectives. In some cases, the interest that other participants showed in collectives' work helped them to strengthen their confidence. In other cases, seeing what other groups are working with gave them some peace of mind that they're actually doing good. As Raven mentioned, collectives often struggle to have their contribution recognised, but through Wānanga, they're able to see it themselves within their own projects and within the work that other people are doing. Another participant noted that hearing about similar experiences of organisations working in quite different restoration contexts had encouraged them to seek out connections across a wider community. In this way, enabling leaders to collectively and individually reflect on their progress helps them to create opportunities for further learning. So, the pilot network, as we noted, also provided some insights on the conditions that can facilitate shared learning. I'm just going to go through a few of them here. So first up, co-design with participants helps to strengthen the aims and the processes for shared learning, creating greater buy-in among learners. Second, it's really important to have a small, consistent group of leaders, as this enables the building of the mutual understanding and trust that's really critical for sharing experiences, challenges, and new ideas. Similarly, we found that in-person gatherings were particularly important for establishing these relationships, and especially early on in the learning process. A skilled facilitator was also identified as essential to enable broad participation among the group, with facilitation guidelines helping to establish the group culture and norms. This means that shared learning networks require some ongoing resourcing if they are to be sustainable. Participants reflected that other networks led by like a volunteer facilitator or coordinator had tended not to last as long. Factors that promoted learning within Wānanga included a focus on peer-to-peer learning, where collective leaders were recognised for their real-world expertise, and learning focused on relatable experiences and shared challenges. Similarly, participants found the selection of a specific topic for each Wānanga to be particularly useful, as it helped them to keep the knowledge sharing very focused. Interactive exercises such as breakout groups were also really useful for enabling broad participation and discussion of specific points that were of relevance to those leaders in the room, although technology issues can make this a bit difficult in an online setting. And finally, participants found that the high-level summaries of Wānanga were particularly useful, especially where they included an integrative graphic. Because these summaries were co-produced based on the knowledge shared by participants, they provided a useful reminder of what those key ideas and approaches that were shared were. Video recordings of collectives' presentations were also seen as useful for sharing beyond the group. So what's up next? Well, as this research project wraps up, we're looking for ways that we can support ongoing shared learning among collective leaders into the future. So our plan from here is to hold a few more Wānanga in which we can trial a modified shared learning format based on the feedback we've received. We're also keen to include some new collective leaders in these Wānanga, so if you or another collective leader you know is interested in being involved, please do get in touch, and my email address is at the bottom of the slide. We're also going to be approaching other environmental organisations, networks and funders to seek a longer term home and resourcing for their work. We know there are already organisations out there that are supporting connectivity and shared learning, and we believe that the Collectives Network is a model that could be easily adopted and add value to these organisations. And to support this next step, we'll also be working on a terms of reference that consolidates the insights from this research. So that's definitely enough talking from us. Thank you so much for all of your time and patience today, and a particular thank you to our wonderful collective leaders who made this research possible. If you want to learn more about our research, you can find a range of outputs, include the video that was shared at the beginning of this presentation on the Bioheritage website and data repository, and the QR code on the slide should take you there. We're now keen to hear from you with your questions, reflections and suggestions. Kia ora.
Kia ora, ngā mihi kia kōrua. Thank you for your presentation. To those that are joining us today, if you want clarification on any of what you've heard, or if you have any questions, you can drop those into the questions box on the webinar platform. Catherine's kindly kicked us off with a question. So she asks, thanks for the fundamental research and comprehensive communication of your findings. Could you please comment on the importance of communication within and between collectives?
Do you want me to jump in here, Kylie? Cool, kia ora. Thank you, Catherine, and thanks, Joanne. Yeah, I think this is a really important topic which touches on a couple of different aspects of our research. So one, the shared learning network really helps to strengthen the communication between collectives, which obviously that dynamic of fragmentation has kind of been noted by quite a few people. And as Kylie mentioned, we had a lot of feedback from participants about the importance of hearing what others are doing, and that did a lot for morale as well as the practical sort of knowledge sharing. And from what we can gather, there are challenges in facilitating that sort of region-wide or nationwide communication. I don't want to speak on behalf of our participants, but the sort of things that we observed and heard from were about the resource challenges and the limitations on capacity and time. So these collectives are just managing enormous workloads. So adding in that sort of the outreach that it takes to connect people across the country is a significant challenge, but also there was clearly a lot of benefit from having that communication. And then within collectives, yeah, again, I think I can probably not speak too much for our participants and our collective leaders, but we did have a bit of discussion about how one of the challenges that we had with the network was actually the way that the learning was concentrated on the leaders who attended, and the struggles that can occur in trying to share that learning more widely within the collective. So I think that's the sort of thing we're really interested in exploring in the new adapted model that we're trialing for the next 6 months, is how we can maybe involve a few more members of collectives and support those leaders in sharing the learning more widely in their own organisations. So I hope that covered off some of your points. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Speaking about moving forward, you know, we already have national networks like Predator Free New Zealand and the New Zealand Landcare Trust. So how is this network different, or is it different?
I can take a turn. So I guess as you say, the New Zealand Landcare Trust is already working with a whole range of catchment and predator-free, well, not predator-free, but biodiversity-focused groups across the country. And so they usually have a kind of a regional facilitator that works with a range of groups. And so I think the collectives network is kind of analogous to that and certainly drew inspiration from those kinds of models. But a couple of the things that we heard from collectives is that there isn't anyone who's specifically focused on the work that they do. So like, for example, the Landcare Trust is really working directly with groups who are doing the planting and things on the ground. So there's no one who's kind of bringing together collective organisations themselves and recognising their kind of learning needs. And also right now, a lot of the networks that we have established are quite focused on particular sectors of the conservation community. So that might be supporting catchment groups, or it might be supporting predator-free groups. And that actually there's a lot of commonality in terms of the types of challenges that these collectives are facing, and or that groups in general are facing. And so there's a real opportunity here for organisations to learn from one another beyond those kind of like sector silos. And so in setting up the Te Taio Collectives Network from the beginning, actually asked people, would they rather have something that was more focused, for example, around like iwi hapū collectives? And they very clearly expressed an interest in going beyond, and they thought there was a real opportunity to learn from a wide diversity of approaches. So yeah, I guess 2 points of distinction are one, the focus on collectives, and two, the focus on diverse types of conservation and restoration.
Cool, thank you. To our audience, if you have any questions, please use the question box on the webinar platform. We've probably got time to take another one or two. So just while you're typing there, I've got another one. So what does the growing number of collectives mean for regional councils and other territorial authorities? Are collectives just replacing regional council functions?
Do you want me to jump in here, Kylie, or do you want to take this one?
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Kia ora. So I think there's a really important distinction to make, which is the way that collectives complement and bring together a lot of different groups It's not necessarily about replacing regional councils or regional authorities, but about being able to coordinate and collaborate for those sort of community scale shared visions. There is a bit of a tension here around resourcing and making sure that there's not overlap, but also that there's not necessarily a handing over of responsibilities for certain things without having the resourcing to back that up. So I think that's one of the key tensions as we go forward and navigate a sort of changing landscape for restoration that involves potentially more devolution, but more community-led and community-based restoration activities. But ultimately, I wouldn't see them as replacing those functions necessarily, but complementing and allowing a sort of coordination and collaboration. And I think it's really important to emphasize the value of having community-led visions and strategies for restoration, which allows for that sort of intergenerational long-term planning, but also buy-in and ownership. So some of our collective leaders talked about how for predator-free groups specifically, this is something that will need ongoing maintenance for generations. We need communities to take ownership and be part of it at a fundamental level. And I just pass over to Kylie in case she has some other thoughts as well, because I know she has done a lot of thinking in this area. So if you have anything else to add, Kylie.
No, I guess maybe just one thing is that the collectives themselves kind of differ a little bit in terms of their relationships to local and central government agencies. And so in some cases, collectives are kind of directly funded and supported by a regional council. And in those cases, I think the collective allows, as you say, Raven, a really kind of community-led entity that extends and supports the work that the regional council is doing, and also kind of acts as like an intermediary organisation between the council and the very many community groups that are out there, because I think that's one of the things that regional councils are really struggling with, is how to keep in contact with the very large number of community groups working across the country. In other instances, the collective has kind of emerged of its own accord in a kind of more grassroots way, but similarly, it then plays a role of working across a whole range of community groups and advocating to council about some of the changes it thinks are needed in order to kind of restore and protect Aotearoa. So I think many regional councils across the country see that as a really valuable role also in terms of having that mechanism for a strong community voice.
Another question posted. Do you know roughly how many collectives there are currently operating in Aotearoa?
I'll take that one. I think it's a slightly difficult thing to know exactly, because it kind of depends on how strong a web presence the collectives have. When Kitty Joy Wallace and I did a survey back in 2021 of collectives, we identified 27 collectives participated in that survey. There were certainly a few that we approached who we didn't get a response from. And I think the number of collectives has grown since then. So I'm going to say more than 25 and up to 50 at a guess.
Cool, thank you. And just a final question. So how do collectives avoid overlapping or competing with smaller community conservation groups? Because we know there's a lot of those in the country, right? So are they doing the same things or different things?
Go ahead, Raven.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sharon. So yeah, we heard about this sort of tension and opportunity a lot from collective leaders. A lot of people made it really clear that one of the big challenges they face in terms of not overlapping with the community groups they support is funding. So some groups will deliberately not apply for funding that they know that their community groups are applying for, because they don't want to essentially compete with the groups that they're supporting. So that's a really important area where the wider restoration system and policy funding environment, it would be beneficial for there to be that greater recognition of that specific role of collectives as a connecting, supporting organisation. The other thing is that we heard a lot about how collectives are really careful to not claim credit for the work that the community groups they support are doing. So a lot of funders and agencies want to know how many trees planted, how many traps checked, that sort of thing. And collectives do a lot of work to make sure they really clearly distinguish between what they've done to support and what the community groups themselves have done. So from our research, we saw a lot of care and very careful negotiation so that collectives could share and celebrate and uplift the work they were doing while celebrating the specific work that the community groups that were part of their collectives were also doing. But yes, this is a sort of an ongoing challenge and opportunity, I think, in restoration, and making sure that we have a really diverse restoration sector in New Zealand that can do all the different types of work that we need for success towards some of these goals.
Kia ora, Raven, and kia ora, Kylie. Thank you both for your presentation today, and good luck with the next steps with the network, Collectives Network. And ngā mihi kia koutou. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. We hope you've enjoyed the webinar. We've recorded the webinar, of course, so you can share it with your colleagues, clients, or friends, whoever you think will find it useful. It'll be available on the BioHeritage website in about 2 or 3 days, and the collectives report, as I mentioned, will also be available on the website to download if you haven't managed to download it today from the handout section. So in closing, I'd like to close with our karakia whakamutanga. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapunui, kia wātia, kia māma te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua, koe rā ka whakairia ki runga, kia tina, haumie, huie, tai ki e. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora koutou.